Hey YouTube, this go around things are mostly going to follow what the write-up here says, without much going afield. So if you just want to read it, you can just read it. As I demonstrated in part 1 in a single sentence, the injustice of wealth is more significant than both sex and race combined. The fact is, the effects of race and sex would dissolve entirely if wealth was controlled across all variables. There are groups that comprise an above-average representation in the poor. The fix for this is not to leave the system of oppression intact and argue for elevation of one group over the other. Not only is this injustice, it is division personified. The people that will aid you in this goal are the people that want the system of oppression to remain. They are perfectly fine with helping you declare someone else the new bottom of the ladder, so long as you don't knock over the ladder. Said simpler, it's the wealthy that want you focused on race, gender, or anything else. Anything except wealth. They're not helping you, they're helping themselves. More importantly, you are helping them, at which point anything you say about oppression is, at best, laughable, and at worst, malicious. You can't argue for justice while committing injustice. It's just, it should be a no-brainer, but you see it a lot. Here are the two lines for you to contrast to examine the truth of my point. So the typical social justice argument is that demographic X, whatever that may be, race, sex, whatever ism you want to talk about, ageism, but mostly what we see continuously being pushed is race and sex. But the point is anything except wealth. We're talking about the standard rhetoric. So, demographic X is oppressed. At any tier, they have it worse than a straight white male, therefore we need to give X special consideration. This is the standard social justice argument. So, here's a contrasting statement. A rich white male and a poor white male have less in common, privilege, quality of life, etc., than a rich white male and a rich black female. So here's a point there. Both race and gender have less effect to your quality of life than wealth. One trait. Two traits. The only two that are getting talked about have less effect than this one, which isn't getting talked about. That should really say something to you. Therefore, wealth is the actual source of oppression. If you control out wealth, generalities across a demographic, like for instance the fact that there are a disproportionate number of, say, black people in poverty, is what should be said there, the variable disappears entirely, meaning white privilege has nothing to do with skin color, but wealth distribution and democracy. If you encourage people towards solidarity with a specific group, whichever group that may be, and there's a vote, minority populations, and I mean specifically minority populations, not ethnicities. You can be a minority in a thought. You can be a minority in an ideology. You can be a minority. It doesn't matter what it is. In terms of, even in a pure democracy, you lose. In something like what we have, you really, really lose. The age of spin, right? So what's the point of the above? The people that champion social justice, that do not have as their primary aim the correction of wealth imbalance, are, knowingly or unknowingly, not only aiding social justice, they're actually fighting against it. You're actually creating injustice. When you argue that racism is the primary problem and racism needs to be addressed, then you go out and you lobby on racism. You've left wealth intact. You're going to leave wealth intact. In fact, you are actively taking voices away from that message. You're taking ears away from that message. Not only that, but the fact of the matter is, if each group of voices that's lost from the message of social injustice, say they appease the group. Let's say they appease black people on wealth distribution, but they leave the system intact as it is. Wealth inequity, but they elevate black people, right? That's the goal. Okay, so what happens then? Well, some new group becomes the new bottom, and you haven't fixed anything. All you've done is argued that you shouldn't be on the bottom anymore. Except the problem is that the bottom is unjust, and that's the reason you don't want to be at the bottom. So rather than argue that you should be moved up the rung, maybe you should argue that the ladder shouldn't be used. I mean, I would think it's a no-brainer, but the whole reason these messages were constructed, and they were constructed back on text a little bit. In academia, they were constructed in Hollywood. These are not poor people making these messages. These are wealthy people making these messages. The wealthy don't care about social justice. The wealthy do care that you remain divided and therefore not tear down the system of oppression. So, why don't we get rid of that division that people are calling unity? Doesn't it seem like it's time?